Hi there. My name is Andy Babinski, and I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about my experience with a one-person show, creating your own one-person show. So what this is about, it's not if some company is doing a one-person show and you audition and you get it. Well, how do you handle it? No, it's really about how you on your own can kind of get the balls rolling, kind of get something started, which is especially right now with the pandemic and the shutdowns. You can do a lot of things online, and with the social distancing, it's hard to work with other people anyway. You still can, but you can definitely do things on your own. So this is just how to get something started and how to think about it, and to have it in your back pocket. To have it there. Let me tell you my experience with a one-person show. Most people, once you've done theater for a while, you will have one or two shows that you just have done a lot of times. For musicals, maybe you've done Sound of Music many times. Maybe you've been in 12 Angry Men many times. For me, by the time I went to grad school with my MFA in acting, I had been in 7 versions of A Christmas Carol. Now, not just A Christmas Carol 7 times, they were 7 different versions. And in the course of that, I had played almost every role, including some of the women. I was the charwoman, which was so much fun, because some of the versions we played multiple roles. I also played Scrooge a few times. So I had a lot of that down. And so it always was in my head to do a one-person version of A Christmas Carol. Patrick Stewart had done it on Broadway, where he just stood on stage and he played all the roles, talking to himself and whatever else. So it was possible. And I wasn't necessarily thinking of a full hour and a half, 2-hour show. Something, short, maybe 45 minutes that I could take to schools. Remember when you were in school, grad school, or maybe even middle school, and you would have assemblies, and sometimes, theater would come. Well, or a juggler or something else. Why not create your own and go? So that was always in the back of my head. While I was in grad school, we had a fundraiser where people did different things, and I thought, now's my opportunity. And I went ahead and I edited the script down, and I put together a 45-minute Christmas Carol. And I ended up videotaping it. If you're interested, you can look for it on YouTube, Andy Babinski Christmas Carol. And I just had one base costume, blue vest, white shirt, frou Dickens thing, and that was it. That was all I needed for my show. Other one-person shows are more extravagant, but it's whatever you want to do. So after that, I ended up going to schools, and I raised, did I get over $1,000? I raised a lot. Since then, I've done it a couple times on my own, made my own money. You just have it in your back pocket. I've done it just for friends, for family sometimes. It's just something I have. So now I'm just gonna, I've given a couple workshops about basically this, and I come up with like 2.5 pages of notes that I would pass out to everyone, and we go over them. Right now, what I'm going to do is it's going to be kind of boring, I hope not, but I'm just going to go through my notes with you, and I'll read them and give comments, and so I apologize that I'll be looking at my notes and then back up a lot. But right now, I'm just going to go through, throw things out at you. I understand you'll be getting this on YouTube or something else, so you can always pause and go back, skip, whatever. This is just what I have to offer. I've not really been trained in this. This is something I just did myself. So this is my own experience and my own research, which is what I'm recommending for you. Do it yourself, come up with your own. There's no right way. It's like writing a novel. You just do it. And then you figure out what's good and what's not. But the main thing is just to do it. Woody Allen said 50% of success is just showing up. Just showing up and doing it is huge. So right now, just do it. All right. So some reasons why coming up with your own one-person show, and it doesn't have to be you have to write it. You could just assemble it from an existing script or something else. But why it might work for you. So, like I said, you could share it, whether it's you go out and get bookings and get people to pay you, or whether you just do it for friends. You could. I knew someone that was working with a theater company that they had a couple major cancellations. The theater almost closed, but they wanted to keep it alive, and they had to figure out what to do to keep it alive. And one of the people who was still there said, well, I have a one-person show. And they said, okay. And so, like, for a month, that's what they did, and he had it in his back pocket. Other people will, if they have ins with a theater, they'll talk to them and say, well, how about, you have your run of whatever show you're doing at 11 o'clock or midnight. I do my one-person show. I'll advertise it. I'll do all that. But, you've got the space. And maybe we can arrange it that people after the show, your show, they can stick around. Half an hour later, I'll do my one-person show. And so you'll always have that show to do. And you could also shop it out and try to get people to produce it as part of their season. Or you could just produce it yourself. Get your venue and have it run, whatever. You could do it for fundraisers. It's a great thing to add to your resume that you do a one-person show. Not everyone does. And that shows a lot of initiative, a lot of ability that just that you did it. It's like I said, writing a novel. Anyone can, very few have. So once you say you've done it, that's impressive. It's a way to, like for right now, if you're not doing much, if any theater, it's a way to develop and maintain your acting skills. It could also help you develop this. If this is the type of art form you want to do, there are some artists that this is what they do. Spalding Gray was one, Eric Bogosian, Anna DeVere Smith. These are all people that they don't just do this, but it's one of the ways that they do things. John Leguizamo, they make one-person shows, in addition to other things too, but it's a way to start. And even if in the beginning you don't know what you're doing and it's not great, most novelists and playwrights, maybe their first play was a big smash, maybe you know of some, maybe it was moderate and eventually, but even their first one, that's the first one they got produced. They most likely had some before that weren't so hot until they got better at it. So even if what you're starting now isn't so hot, you're training yourself. And so eventually you may get really good at this. So if the idea of it is great, then just doing it on your own now, from what I'm suggesting, is a way just to get started. And from there, you may be able to talk to people to help you really get it better. And then also, it's relatively an easy thing to do on your own in terms of you don't have to organize a bunch of other people. You can just do it. There's nothing really stopping you from doing it. And if you do have it in your back pocket, it goes with you, assuming, costumes or props or whatever you need, you take with you, but wherever you are, you'll have it. So it's a great little thing. So common source material and subjects. Often they're biographies or autobiographies. If it is an autobiography, it doesn't necessarily, if it's about you, it doesn't have to be I was born and it ends with here I am now. It can be just a section. It could be about, this was my high school experience. This was my graduate school experience. This was me the summer I went to blah, blah, blah camp. It could be just a section. It's like the Spielberg movie Lincoln. In a sense it's biography, but it's not. He was born and then eventually he was assassinated. It was just this little section of his presidency. It wasn't even his whole presidency. It was a section of his presidency. So you could do autobiography about a section. It could be original. Some people write, total fiction, and it's just one person and it's new. That, more often than not, in my experience, one-person shows tend to be biography or autobiography and not fiction, but there's no reason they can't. It's harder because you have to be much more creative and more of a writer. You still have to be a writer otherwise for the nonfiction stuff, but at least you have stuff to adapt and work from. But you can. There's nothing that's going to stop you. Adaptations, you could take something that exists, and if it's public domain, you don't need to get the rights. If it does exist, you need the rights, but you can adapt that, whether it's literature or something else. You can research an incident or something and put it together into something that will, just you assemble it, basically. It could be done by interviewing people. If you wanted to interview your family and friends and then do a one-person show about my family and friends, or your college peers, or if you're an incident you're investigating, you could do interviews and then do that. In fact, the Laramie Project, if you know that's based on interviews. So 8 people originally did that, but that kind of idea, you could just go and get interviews. Examples, Hal Holbrook's Mark Twain Tonight, you might be familiar with. He took a lot of Mark Twain's writings and did that, put it together himself. Julie Harris was in something called The Belle of Amherst, which was about Emily Dickinson. I don't know how much of a hand she had in creating it. She might not have had any. She might have had a lot, but she played her. Elaine Stritch, before she passed away, they made I'm not sure if it's a movie or a videotape of it called Elaine Stritch at Liberty. It's just her telling life stories. Billy Crystal had one on Broadway, 700 Sundays, Life Stories, other people, John Leguizamo, whatever. Those are just kind of ideas. Subject matters, like if you do research and stuff, they tend to be a lot of historical figures. Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad was just on Broadway a couple years ago doing one about Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ. Lawrence Fishburne just made a movie a few years ago about, who was it, Clarence Thomas, a one-man show. So they're historical figures. They can be about artists. And by artists, I don't necessarily mean painters, although there are those. They could be about actors. They could be about singers that you research. And if you do that, you can include bits of their work. Hal Holbrook's Mark Twain Tonight wasn't about Mark Twain. It was Mark Twain talking. It was from his pieces. And I guess he might have given some Mark Twain autobiography. But he was in the persona of Mark Twain doing all of that. But you could really string pieces together. You could string pieces of someone's work. I know John Gielgud did one about Shakespeare called The Ages of Man that just had a bunch of sonnets and monologues. The whole thing is just a string of that. If it's a musician or something else, look and see if you can get their music, especially if it's old time. If you do Stephen Foster and do Swanee River and a bunch of songs that are free, and you could just tell his story. They also can be about your own viewpoint. I can't remember her name, but someone did a one woman show that was about her experience with religion. That was just her point of view about her experience and blah, blah, blah. Any of that kind of material. So while it's not necessarily autobiography, it's just about your take, your growth. Who knows? I mean, you could do that. Now, I broke down myself 3 main types of one-person shows, and this is my own categories. They're basically a monologue. It's just one person talking. You're in one character, and it's just, I'm going to speak to you for, usually they're not 2-hour shows, an hour and a half at the most, maybe a little more than an hour, or if it's, a shorter version, like you take somewhere a half hour or 45 minutes or so. It's just one person talking. How can that be interesting? Oh, sometimes they're great. They're wonderful. The second type is when the actor will actually play different characters, but they will be almost like 10-minute plays or 5-minute plays, and they're scenes, and they're character A, and they're usually some voice or some physicality, and they'll do that for like a monologue, 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's like a little scene, and then there'll be a change, and then they will switch into in which they change into another character and do a whole nother scene. And then John Leguizamo does a lot of this. And just, character. That's where you're not really playing just one person the whole time. You're playing a bunch. Those usually are, there's a theme. There's something that connects them. It's not so much a plot, although there's no reason it couldn't be. It's just harder to make that off. But there's just an idea, and that just connects them. And the characters may reference each other or not. It's up to you. The last type is when you're playing multiple characters, not in individual scenes. They're multiple characters that often will talk to each other, like Christmas Carol, or you may be yourself or a narrator, and then you'll go into one of the characters, and then you go back to the narrator, or blah, blah, blah. So that's where it's all mixed together. So those are the 3 main types that I've experienced. And then there are combinations. Whoopi Goldberg had a couple shows on Broadway. Her breakout, I think it was just called Whoopi Goldberg, and she was herself talking, and then she would go into a character for a little bit, and then go back to herself, and so it was one long monologue without breaks, but yet there were characters. I don't remember if the characters talked to each other or not, but these are all just varieties. So now I'll get more specific. The one that's probably most common is the first one, the monologue. It's just one long monologue. I mean, there could be an intermission if it's really long, and so 2 monologues if you want to call it that. When this happens, in my experience, usually you're not so much putting on some extreme character in terms of, a voice and a physicalization, although there's no reason you couldn't. Usually it's just much more naturalistic, much more realistic, much more believable. Your characterization generally is much more as you would if you were playing one role in a, large cast production. And there's usually a full depth to the character. It's a fully realized 3-dimensional character. And of course, it doesn't have to be if you come up with something else, but often this is what happens. Usually in these, there's no break outside of an intermission. There's one costume. I mean, the person could have a jacket or something else. And again, you can always do what you want, but in my experience, it's just one costume. And the set is either one of two extremes. It's minimalist, which is like nothing. It's a bare stage, and there's a spotlight on you, or maybe the lights are up, maybe there's a chair, maybe there's, a table. The other extreme is it's a fully realized set. It's the same as any other show where there was a show Kathleen Turner was in. I can't remember, it was about a news reporter. And the set was just like, you would expect for any show, but she was the only person on stage. And she just walked around the set and did whatever. So if that's the case, that's not one you can take with you as easily, unless you can also do it without the set. But if you can do it just on a bare stage, all you need is you. That was my Christmas Carol. You could take it into classrooms and just, there it is. So with those, often what's done, or what you can do, is do multimedia. You could have projections and videos. Of course, if you do that, you'll have to have the equipment for it and get the rights and all that, but you don't have to. You can also do it without. And in these shows, usually in my experience, the actor is talking directly to the audience the whole time. Now, whether the audience can talk back, that's up to you. But it's rarely is there a fourth wall. I mean, there is one, what is it, Secret Honor, about Nixon, in which there is a fourth wall. There's also one, women, if you're interested, what is it, I forget it is, what a famous French playwright did one, is called The Human Voice. It's only a half hour. It's a woman on the phone. She's, in her bedroom, and she's on the phone talking to her lover, and it's a really powerful, emotional thing. There's a video with Ingrid Bergman doing it and other people doing it. Cocteau, I think, is who wrote it. I'm not sure. But there's a fourth wall there. Most time, these monologue shows, there's no fourth wall. You're talking to the audience. You're sharing your story. So that's, in my experience, the most common, but that doesn't mean that's what you should do. That's just, if you find versions, that's what you'll often see. The second type is where you have a series of scenes, where each scene is a different character. This was popularized, I want to say, in the late 70s, early 80s. Lily Tomlin did The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe. There's a video of that. You can watch her do these different characters. And Eric Bogosian does this a lot. One of his big ones, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. They'll be like 10-minute scenes. And the characters, they, like I said, they may reference each other, they may not. You can also go back to a character later on, but it's one character at a time. But usually there's a theme, like I said, not necessarily a plot. It can be sometimes from interviews, but this would be, monologues put together. This is what Anna Devere Smith has done. Her Twilight Los Angeles, it was about riots, the Rodney King riots, I think. If that's wrong, I apologize. But I think that's what it's about. She interviewed a lot of people and just gave a bunch of short, monologues based on what she came up with. Now, here, at this point, since you're playing so different characters, the characterizations usually aren't as believable. They aren't as in-depth. I mean, you can still try for that, but it becomes important to get them different so that you can see you're playing a different character. That's part of the show, is actually saying, now I was A, now I'm B, and the audience can see that. And now I'm C, and they can see that. So to make them different, you don't have to lose yourself necessarily, because the audience will be able to, they know it's still you. They'll always see the actor playing the character. In the first type, no, they could lose it. They could, just see the character. But in a show like this, you're reminding them every time you switch that it's an actor playing the character. So they're going to know they don't have to buy completely what you're doing. This allows you to be a little cartoony, a little exaggerated. To some extent, it's usually necessary in order to get the characters different. Now, if you're brilliant, Daniel Day-Lewis or someone else that's completely transformative, and you can pull off completely believable characters, go for it. But don't, break your back trying. Because it's really okay to be a little cartoony and a little exaggerated, because part of the show, like I said, is the audience seeing you putting on these different roles. So that's absolutely fine. And then the depth you give them is up to you, or whatever the show calls for. In these situations in which there are breaks, usually there are costume changes. I mean, almost full costume changes. In between them, there could be a blackout, there could be a lighting change, there could be, um, you know, uh, music covering, in between, and that's, what you want. I mean, that's up to you if you want it or not. But that tends to be, what the breaks allow for that. And to give you a more extreme, now look at me, I'm this character. Now look at me, I'm this character, and you really go there. The set usually stays the same, but again, that's up to you. And this one again is often talking directly to the audience, but again, that's up to you. So that's that second type of show. The third type of show is the one that I did with A Christmas Carol, and you don't see it as often. It takes a lot of energy and a certain amount of skill, and I don't mean that this person is necessarily better than another, but it's a type of skill that you have or you don't. It's not just playing different characters, but it's being able to switch right there in front of the audience with an energy that they can tell I have just switched into another character. And that they could keep that up. That takes a lot. So this is where you have multiple characters without breaks, without, stopping to change your costume or anything else. So in recent times, one of the more famous ones was I Am My Own Wife. It won the, pretty sure it won the Tony, but also won the Pulitzer. He will just change into, I don't think he had conversations with multiple characters at the same time, but he would change from one character to another right in front of the audience, and that was part of the performance. And I like to tell people sometimes that change, seeing the change, is interesting, and not necessarily this long, intricate I'm werewolf change, but just, not, okay, I'm here, and then I'm here, and then I'm here, and then I'm here, but actually I'm here, and now I'm doing this, and then I'm back to this. And you can kind of see the actor switching, and then switching. So, sometimes they will have a narrator, sometimes they won't. In a lot of cases, or in some cases, the narrator is the actor, saying, okay, hi, this is me, and this is what happened to me. I went to work, and, you're late to work, and, that was a really bad version of my boss. But that's what you do. And you're like, yeah, I'm sorry, boss. Blah, blah, blah. So it's yourself narrating. It could be a certain character narrating. It could be the narrator, which I had in my Christmas Carol. Costumes in this experience, it's the two things I've seen. Most common is some sort of base costume that you wear the whole time. That's what I had for my Christmas Carol. It was, a vest and the Dickens thing and everything else, and that was it. And I didn't do anything else. I wanted to keep it minimal. Other times people will have a couple costume pieces. Maybe they'll have, if you're clever and creative, a scarf or something that it may just be in your pocket, and then later you pull it out and you'll be someone who's fancy, and then you'll put it over your head and you're something else, and then you'll put it around your neck and you're something else, something like that. Glasses you take on and put off, and then whether your glasses are on here, you're one character, and then suddenly you're another character, and then here you're another character, something like that, or something with your tie. Something that was very interesting, here's another way to do it that I saw someone do that was done extremely well. This person had, the set was like 5 or 6 boxes. And so they would have to bring the boxes with them if they took them somewhere else, but it wasn't that much. And throughout the play, in front of the audience, they would sometimes rearrange the boxes to get a different set. Great. That in and of itself is great. But it turns out the boxes were specifically made, and you could pop them open, and inside were different costume pieces or props. And these were minimal, not a whole costume. Again, it's a hat, it's a coat, it's whatever, but they were within the within the boxes, so they didn't have to be on your body. So that's a great idea if you wanted to go that route. If you come up with something else, great. But with this type of show, you do the changes, you do everything in front of the audience. That's part of the performance. It's kind of cool, I think. It's done well, and it's not that hard. It just takes practice. Okay, at these kind of shows, the characters, remember we said with the second one, they could be a little cartoony. In this type of show, they could be completely cartoony. They don't have to be, but since you're doing them, in front of the audience, and they need to keep straight who's talking to who, and maybe you'll bring back a character that hasn't been there for a while, they have to know who the character is like that. And so the more extreme, the better, and that tends to lead for more cartoony, this is why Dickens is great. Dickens tends to write cartoony-ish characters. Not all of them, but they exist. And so a lot of characters you can just go there. Now, if you go to a full stereotype, there are dangers in that, in terms of being offensive and stuff. But sometimes it may be worth it. Maybe depending on what the script is and what your reason to use a stereotype is. But here it can be, and the audience will see you playing multiple roles all the time. So that kind of, unless your specific characterization is itself bad or offensive or something, it's usually very entertaining to go that route and to play these different things. Where was I? Here you often go back and repeat characters a lot, and then the narrator often speaks to the audience. The other characters, it depends on the show. In fact, often they don't, but whatever you want to do. In fact, this is when I would do this as a workshop, this is what I had the students do. I gave them a very short script, which is based on the old melodrama cliche. Melodrama is where the hero is all in white, the strong jaw and chin, and the villain's all in black with the top hat and the mustache, and the heroine is tied to the tracks. Well, the exchange that you may be familiar with is, you must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. Hero jumps in. I'll pay the rent. My hero. Curses. Foiled again. So that's really short. It was enough for people to memorize, and I gave them that at the end of the first day. Their assignment was to come up with 3 characters. And they don't have to be the melodrama. They could be any characters they want. They could set it anywhere and do whatever. But to come up with the characterizations that are clearly identifiable, rehearse it, make the characters pop from one to another so the audience can tell, and tell the story. I'll get to that in a second. And this is what we did, and we spent a lot of time doing that. And so that's one thing that it takes practice and confidence to be able to do. That's this third type. All right. You could also take an existing script and do the characters yourself. There's no reason why not. I was thinking, there's a play by Neil LaBute called Bash, which is basically 3 monologues. And there are other plays like that. That would kind of be the second version, except because they're so long, is closer to the first in that they're much more believable characterizations. But you could do that. Of course, you'd have to get the rights. But there are public domain scripts out there, like Christmas Carol is public domain. You can come up with your own version of it. Shakespeare's public domain. Alan Cumming, maybe a decade or 2 ago, on Broadway, he did a Macbeth, a one-man Macbeth. He played all the roles. And the concept was kind of cool. He had a breakdown. I'm not sure if he was actually Macbeth or someone else, but he was in a mental institution, and he had a breakdown, and he was reliving it all, playing all the roles himself. But that worked. There was also something I remember when I was in Chicago. It was called McHomer. An actor took Macbeth and did the whole show, all the roles themselves, but he based the characterization for every role on a Simpsons character. And to help the audience out, and he did impersonations. To help the audience out, whenever he was doing a character, he would have a projection behind him of the Simpsons character to help them keep it straight. But, if it helps, it helps. I think eventually there might have been some copyright issues and he had to close it. But if it's public domain, you can do that with any show. You have to get the rights for it, But bear in mind, too, it may not be what the author intended. And so that's just, that's a tricky thing with rights. But of course, if it's public domain, you can do whatever you want. If it's really different, like it goes against what they wanted, I would suggest saying based on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, rather than, if it's a show where Romeo and Juliet hate each other, whatever, which you're an artist, you can do what you want, but I would say based on. That's just my own personal thing. And examples, let's see, Spoon River Anthology came to my head. If you're familiar with it, you could do that. It's a one-person show. Laramie Project, if you really wanted to do that. Anything like that. Now, when you here's a section on creating multiple characters. Now, I'm someone that I've always played goofy characters, and I come up with different characters and stuff. Not everyone does that. If you're not used to it, here are some ideas. And if you are, here are still some ideas. Well, 2 things have to happen. 1, they have to be distinct so that you can tell one from another. 2, they have to be consistent. A character shouldn't morph. Even if they grow up, or maybe there's some gigantic change in them, but generally they need to be consistent so the audience will always know which character you're doing. Same thing if you do accents or dialects. That should be consistent so that they'll always know. And in this case, the narrator is often neutral. It's just you. No reason it has to be, but that's generally it. In fact, to me, it'd be weird if the narrator was some, created character, physical, vocal, and the other characters were physical, vocal, and you had one character that was just you just talking. And there was no specific reason for that. That would seem weird to me, but who knows? You may want that. I don't know. But often it's the narrator who's just you. Now, types, start with stereotypes as a way to get going. And then maybe, I think, start with it and then see if you can make it your own in a comfortable way. You can do impersonations of celebrities or thing about celebrities, unless you want it very specifically to be, I'm doing Peter Lorre. That was an awful Peter Lorre. Unless you want it to be specifically that, start from an impersonation and then just let it go a little bit somewhere else. It's a great thing. Or if I heard this, I forget where I heard this. If you do an impersonation of someone you know, most of us know someone who's a character, And if you can do an impersonation of someone you know, you don't necessarily have to change it because no one's going to know. Well, outside of people you know, and then that's dicey in a different way. But still, if you have an uncle or an aunt and you can kind of use that as a basis, that's something. Maybe, ideas when your kid's playing as an animal. Do it as an animal or do it as a cartoon character or something just to get you started. This is a way to go. Okay, here are some specific changes. I'll just rattle them off. With vocal changes. Pitch, whether you're talking higher up, whether you're talking whatever's naturally, maybe you lower your voice. All of those can be different. Tempo, how fast you're talking. Maybe the character talks very fast, maybe they talk your rate, maybe they talk slower, maybe they talk really slow. Those are things. Volume, loud, medium, soft. Accents or dialects. Vocal placement, whether it's more nasal or whether it's back in the throat or whatever. These are things to play with. Certain character voices or effects, impersonations, tics. These are all little things that there may be no reason to have, for such a character to have a low voice or such a character to have a high voice, but if you're doing 3 characters, that's a way to split them. Just randomly assign sometimes and see which ones you like better. Physical changes you could make, posture, whether you're straight up or hunched down. Your energy, whether you're high energy or whether you're natural energy or whether you're kind of lethargic energy. Mannerisms, what you do physically with your body and your head or whatever. What's interesting is sometimes kind of tricky, your orientation to other characters. And by this, I mean if you're tall or short. If I'm playing a tall character, I could suddenly, everything I do is like this, and you kind of get the impression that I'm taller because I'm looking down. Rather, if I'm playing a short character, I could just do the monologue just like this the whole time and be looking up, and you kind of get that impression. So that would be something. Your general attitude or demeanor, whether you're, a mean person, a nice person, these kind of things. Movement, some characters may move a lot, some may move a little. What you do with your face, these are all just ideas of things. And these are things like, if you were playing just one role in a full Christmas Carol, say, you're Mrs. Cratchit, and that's it. You may not necessarily come up with any of this. You may. But at this point, when you're playing roles, when you're playing multiple roles, you need to some degrees, to make them distinct. The trick would be like flashcards. If you suddenly went into a character and said it to be or not to be speech, someone who had seen the show ideally should know which character you're doing, even if the lines are different. It's identifiable. Another thing you could do is their current physical, emotional, or psychological state. Someone could be sick. They have a cold. It doesn't have to be in the script, but suddenly that distinguishes that character. Where was I? They may be half asleep. They may be very depressed. They may be exuberant, paranoid, drunk. Anything that suddenly differentiates them from other characters. And then, unless there's a really clear thing happening, keep it consistent. Props, costumes and set. Again, these are things you have to decide. The props can be nothing or very, very little. I had no props for A Christmas Carol. I had the one costume. I had no sets. My intent was for it to be minimal. I think Patrick Stewart did the same. You could have some. You could also have a ton. You could have the whole set that everything there is going. And then again, the question is, are they on your body or are they preset? Another way to do, if you're doing a variety of characters, is pre-existing characters you played in the past. Feel free, if you did a character so many years ago, and I don't mean, if you played Atticus Finch, bring Atticus Finch into your play. No, I mean bring the physicalization, bring the vocalization, and the character, meaning who the person is, of course, can be totally different. But if you've developed something somewhere else, by all means, Now, if you're afraid, you don't want people to say, "Oh, you're just doing your blah blah blah," well, then change it a little bit. But it's a starting point. And then, when experimenting, when playing with it, commit. Really go 100%. Don't have to it. Go all the way. And that will give you an idea of what it is you have. Then you can make a decision to, cut it or whatever. But when playing different roles, you want them to be extreme anyway. But even at the very least, go all out when you're rehearsing, even if you do it on your own, just to see. And, you can tape yourself or whatever to see what you have. It gives you a better idea. Okay, multiple character acting techniques. Make your characters pop so that when you change from one to another, there's, a clear, brisk, I'm doing this, I'm Bob Cratchit, and then I'm Scrooge, and then you can see there's something about it that makes it very clear. So there's an energetic one into another. It's not huge, but it's noticeable. Changing your focal points. What you don't want to do, the guy does this in Waiting for Guffman, is, he stands over here, and then he stands over here, and then he stands over here, talking to himself. You don't need to do that. It's really, in theater, it's kind of ironic. One of the things is it doesn't matter at all what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. In one sense, none of those things means anything. All that matters, in a sense, is what reads. And so sometimes finding out that simple things read well is all you need. So to have a conversation, all you need is where you're looking. I'm sorry, Mr. Scrooge, please forgive me. No, I will never, blah, blah, blah. Simple turn of the head. I didn't have to jump over here and jump over there. Simple turn of the head. And this is where you can get, a little bit of, I happen to be sitting down looking up, and I'm standing and I'm looking down at you. Or whatever. Those little changes can all help. So the focal points can help. Make sure you maintain their energies. If, Bob Cratchit is very frightened and Scrooge is frightened. Now notice what I did. From those two versions, I kind of put us on different sides. At one point, Scrooge was on one side and Cratchit was on the other, and vice versa. The side, how you put them is up to you, but then you got to keep them. What I just did right there would have been bad if it was a continuing scene. Now, if you go back, to another scene, I guess it would be good if you establish that Cratchit's desk is over here because he's always looking at Scrooge over there. Well, then I would say maintain that for the last scene. But once you set it up in a scene, it's a good idea not to have one character cross to the other side. I mean, you can, but it's just to keep things straight in the audience's mind. When you are a character, you're only one character at a time. You're not playing multiple characters simultaneously. Don't be like, I'm frightened, and I punch me. No. You're one character, and then kind of be totally that character, and then when you switch, you're totally that character. And so one thing you can do is to be reacting to the other person while you're talking, and that kind of helps create that. Almost imagine that the other character will be CGI'd in at some point. But fully commit, and then fully commit, and then fully commit, and fully commit, and fully commit. What else can you do? Sometimes you can tell stories through your reactions, like, if I want to show Cratchit coming in late, I could be Cratchit coming in, or I could be Scrooge working, and then Cratchit, something like that. You'd be surprised how much the audience can fill in the blanks. And it's actually, when it works, it's really effective. The more you can get the audience to actively engage in theater in general, it's really magical. And you can do distance, whether you're, I'm talking to you like this, or hello there, and immediately you get the feel of distance. It's amazing. A little bit of suggestion, the audience will fill in the rest. In terms of where you stand, for the most part, don't move unless it's a really specific decision. You can have your conversation from here to there, and then someone walks in. You don't have to go to the other side of the stage and walk in. I'm Cratchit looking up at Scrooge, and I'm Scrooge looking down, and then in comes blah 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 blah, and Fred. I don't have to jump over there. In fact, I would only move if it's really important for that character to be moving in that moment. And then wherever you move to, you can just keep it from there. You don't have to go back to where the other character is. I mean, the audience knows what you're doing. They will follow you. You are the screen. So they'll follow you. Like the camera can jump different places. You jump different places. The audience is the camera. They'll come with you. You don't see it very often, but one-person musicals, they are possible. The question, one of the big ones is, well, how do you get the music? Maybe if you play the piano, done, you need a piano, or an accordion, or the guitar is common, or if you had another instrument, it could be pre-recorded music, or it could be a cappella. So that's something. Then you have to rights. Musicals, if you're not familiar with this, with paying for rights and stuff, musicals tend to be a whole lot more expensive than straight plays, non-musical plays. So bear in mind. But then again, there's public domain music. Again, if you wanted to do a one-person show about Stephen Foster, his music is public domain. If you wanted to do, whatever. Otherwise, you have to get the rights. And then when it comes to the accompaniment, some one-person shows technically aren't because there's someone off to the side playing the piano. Audra McDonald did one a couple years ago, Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill, in which it's a one-person show, but there's a pianist, and she often refers to him. He might even have a line or two, so it really isn't a one-person show. But even then, I mean, if you have someone, fine, great. But just to be aware, these kind of ideas. And then again, it could be pre-recorded. Of course, then the question is it running constantly? You start it, and then you just, do that. Do you have someone else running it? These are all things to keep in mind. Do you have it on you? I don't know. All right, we're getting kind of close to the end. What I call alternative one-person shows. There's other types of performance and art that at some point is called a one-person show, and it's hard to say where the line is. For instance, stand-up comedy. Most times you'll see televised, or film, someone does a stand-up show. Is that a one-person show? Well, in a sense, yes. Is it, or is it a stand-up routine? I'm not sure. Often, what tends to happen is in my mind, have it be a one-person show, there's some story or some theme that connects it all. Billy Crystal's 700 Sundays, for instance. It's got that. Whereas someone else, Eddie Murphy, you can tell him my age, Delirious or Raw, no, it's just a bunch of different things as opposed to that. But it's hard to say exactly. But stand-up comedy is a big one. Cabarets. When I first heard that, I'm like, oh, someone's doing cabaret, meaning the musical cabaret? No, a cabaret is usually an intimate one-person show. It could be more than one. But it's a person singing and talking in between their songs. But it's really intimate kind of thing. Those are one-person shows. In a sense. I mean, they are and they aren't, and just to give you that idea. Poetry slams, I'm not as familiar with, but to me it would be, the themes. Spoken word, they call these just monologuists. Spalding Gray. It literally, Spalding Gray would just have a table, he'd sit at a table, he'd have a glass of water, and he would just tell you a story. And it was about himself. It was one long monologue. And he's dead, I don't know how many of these, but it was a big deal. So he didn't really form a character. He just basically told you a story. And, some of those exist. Henry Rollins does that too. Magic shows, one-person shows. Ventriloquism can be a one-person show again in this sense if it's connected in a way. Jeff Dunham does a lot of this. Performance art, and that could be anything. Lectures could be a one-person show. Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. I would say the way that was done with all the theatrics and one person leading it, I would call that a one-person show. In a theatrical sense. But again, up to you. Really, it's anything. But at this point, I'm talking about specifically unifying it. Now, because you can do those things without them being unified. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something else. But to me, once you talk about a one-person show, to me, there's some sort of unity. Otherwise, a concert, I don't necessarily think of, a concert as being... something like a concert album, Pink Floyd's The Wall, or, the Who's Tommy, when they would do it. It had something that connected. American Idiot was connected. But anyway, okay, enough on that. Okay, subject selection. Sometimes consider the target audience. If you specifically want something to take to schools, you'll want to pick something. I picked Christmas Carol, and I adapted it. You may want to. When I was in Minneapolis, there was a history theater, did a lot of stuff like this, so you might want to look up historical figures, and for the people who are coming. I would say in general, pick something you're passionate about, not just something that I think this will work. You need to be passionate about it because it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to be with you for a long time. And by the end, you may get sick of it. If you start off not liking it all that much, you're kind of doomed. Maybe you'll pull it off, but it helps to have something you're really passionate about. It's going to be a long haul. You'll have to keep your morale up, and it's going to be kind of lonely work. So it's good if you really enjoy it. I would say play to your strengths. Don't just look at what will sell, but look at what you can bring to it, what you're good at. And it'll make it a lot easier putting it together. And then you look at rights. Do you want to pay rights? Do you want to get something that's public domain? Do you want to write your own thing? And I know very little about that. I will say, though, that if you perform something that's copywritten and you don't get the rights, that's illegal. I mean, maybe there are some cases it isn't, but you'd have to look into that. And if it's illegal, don't do that, or the police will come and take you away and no one will ever see you again. Hopefully not. I mean, hopefully that it won't be what happened, but don't do it. No illegals. Adaptation considerations. Again, depending on how much you change it. I mean, if you just trim it, then I would say adapt it from. If you do the whole thing, then it's, Christmas Carol. If I cut it down, I'd say adapt it from A Christmas Carol. If I really make some changes, significant ones, I would say based on Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And if it totally goes off the rails, I would use suggested by. This is just me. This is what I look at. Another thing to work on as you do it yourself is think about pace. The audience might get bored. So just keep how to speed up and breaks are few and have someone watch it. Or what else? Other things to keep in mind, technical considerations. We talked about costumes, props, sets, lights, if you want to do that, sound. Do you want to go those routes or not? How will you handle them? For me, the thing about Christmas carols, I needed next to none. Once I bought my costume, I was done. Maybe you want to go more, but those are things to think about. You have to think about getting them. You have to think about operating them if someone else needs to run them. You have to think about transporting them. And you have to think about setting them up and taking them down, if there are any. These are all things just to bear in mind. Rehearsing is up to you. I do recommend having a director for the outside eye, at the very least, even if you do it completely on your own, someone to look it over to give you feedback about what reads. Like I said before, what you're doing, in a sense, is irrelevant. All that matters is how it reads. So to let someone you trust tell you how it's reading, and then if you get someone to actually direct it, that's even better. But that's up to you. And if you do get such a person to help you, figure out if they're going to do it out of the goodness of their heart, or because they owe you, or give them a one-time. You pay them once. I paid someone to help me build my Dickens tie, and that was it. Maybe you'll get a royalty thing. You'll say, okay, you help me now, and I'll give you 10% from this point on. If you get someone to write it for you, maybe you're an actor and a director, but not a writer, and you get someone to write it. Maybe it's a one-time fee. Maybe they'll get 50% or whatever you work out with them. And then marketing. I know very little about this, but I'll tell you. Your contacts, tell people ask them to spread the word, ask them for marketing ideas, web pages, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, Instagram, and I'm old, so whatever else is out there now. Flyers that you post, or I went to schools and to the secretaries and I gave them flyers, word of mouth, maybe giving short samples, maybe get discount prices for groups, for schools or whatever, for first-time bookings. Repeating venues. After you go somewhere, let them know, okay, I have another show that if you're interested, contact me. Or maybe in a couple years, call them again and say, remember that show I did for you? I'm offering it again. What you charge is up to you. What did I charge? And you can have discounts. I might have been like $150 for one show, $250 for two shows, $300 for three shows. I don't remember, but talk to other people and see what they were charging. Venues, like we talked about, a theater company, you could use their space on an off night. Mondays they tend to be closed. Maybe throughout the week. Maybe it's that they're only open on weekends. After their shows, midnight shows or whatever, that's possible. Schools, which could be high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, depending on your shows, and colleges, whether it's for their students or you rent a space, you can always go in. It costs nothing to ask. Do you rent spaces? Things like that. Retirement communities usually love this stuff. Churches, any clubs, private parties, depending on what your show is, what the party is. And then the last thing I want to say is for a list of public domain properties, you can probably find them in different places, but I suggest Project Gutenberg. If you Google it, Project Gutenberg, Gutenberg, like the Gutenberg Bible, although older people might think Steve Gutenberg, whatever. And that will give you a list of everything that's public domain that you don't have to get rights. Not only do you not have to get rights, you can make whatever changes you want. You can mix and match. If it's public domain, you can do whatever you want with it. And it's not just, literature, plays, movies, songs. You find public domain movies, and if I imagine there are, and then do whatever you want with them. Okay, that's all I have. A lot of information said very fast. If you have any questions, you can email me. My name again is Andy Babinski. My email is Babin, Andy Babinski, ABABIN15@yahoo.com. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm also going to try talking to Caitlin, who is running all this, and I will give her a list. I have a list, a full page, 2 columns of famous one-person shows that, to my knowledge, you can find online, maybe YouTube, maybe Netflix, maybe libraries will have them. And if you want to see what these types of shows are, if you want to see, different types of show, maybe there's one that catches your mind, maybe there's one that you're interested in, you want to see, oh wow, I didn't know they did a one-person show, I want to see that. Or it's about this person, wow, there's one show about Bram Stoker who wrote Dracula, I want to see that. Or it may be a show that you want to do to get the rights to. So there's a whole list of them, but I'm going to give her that information as well as a copy of these notes. Then to see if she can have it available to anyone who's interested. If that doesn't work out, then you can always email me and I can get you a copy of these notes and a copy of the list. And I came up with this list 3 or 4 years ago. It was the last time I gave one of these workshops. So there have been new ones since, but it's still things you can probably find. All right. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully I've stirred some interest. And the main thing, this is what I've found. You may come up with your own things. You may find stuff better. You do it. It's that whole success is 50% of success is showing up. Just do it. And if it's not good at the first, fine. It will get better. So you got it. Enjoy. And I like to tell people from this point on, I get 10% of anything you ever make in your lives. Remember to send me the check. Talk to Caitlin. She'll get you the address. All right.